The treasurer, unfortunately, is not able to be here, so he can't necessarily give a treasurer's report, but I will give a little bit of what he's working on. And Danilo, who's our service project person, he's going to report a little bit on what's going on with the service project process and getting that set in place. So let me first, I'm just looking because we had 17 of the 20 club members vote on the election. So there is nobody here who did not vote. So let me announce what the results were. The presidents, this is all starting July 1 until the end of June in 2023. And basically, the offices are pretty much the same offices that we had this year, which is good because since we're a new club, it's nice to have same people for a couple of years. And the president is me, Ken Masson. The treasurer is Elkin Montoya. The secretary is Anita Nanchant Kevin. The foundation chair is Alison Larache. The project chair is Danilo Souza. The membership chair is Stephen Masha. And we do have one position still open, and that's a communications chair. We're looking for somebody for that particular position. Any person who's an active member in the club could apply for that position. And I would be glad to explain to them what it's all about. However, also we're at a point now that we're almost ready to start bringing in new members, which is exciting. So that anybody who wants to be a new member of this club has the opportunity once they join to take on that position. And once again, I'll be glad to explain to anybody who's interested what that position entails. All those people are on the board of directors of the club, are the people that are working on the governance of this of the organization. We did also have an amendment to the bylaws, and that amendment gave us the process of how we're going to be able to bring in new people into this organization. Basically, the treasurer has been working on setting up a bank account. That is almost done. It's been a little bit of a challenge because we're an international organization. So we need a bank that can work internationally for us. So he's looked at several banks, and he's zeroing in on one bank right now. He's just got the final details for that. But once that's set up, then we can start bringing in new members to the organization. And to be a new member of the organization, you basically need, this is the process, you need to express an interest to one of the active members of the group that you want to be that. That person will put in an application, send it to the Stephen Marsha, who is the membership chair, and he will review it to make sure it is all set and ready to send to the board of directors. The board of directors will review it, and once they finish their reviewing process and either accept it or are not accepted for whatever reason, they will then send it on to the club for the club members to take a look at in case anybody has any certain concerns about a particular nomination for a person. And it will probably take 3 weeks to a month for the nomination process to be completed. Right now, in order for somebody to be a member of the club, our next period of dues will be from January 1 to the end of June. And so that's a half a year. So half a year membership would cost $44, basically, US dollars. So that's, we're glad to have that opportunity to now start bringing in pretty soon new members to the club. And we look for the opportunity to grow, continues to grow. We have a number of people who also are Rotarians already, and they have an opportunity to be an honorary member of the organization. You can be an active member in one club, an honorary member in multiple clubs. So we welcome Rotarians who are interested in being honorary members to to express that concern to us, and we'll go through the same process with them as we went through with the other people. So we're glad to be here and be that. Basically, as far as we're going to start fundraising soon. We're going to start fundraising for administration costs. We're not ready for project fundraising at this point yet, but we certainly will be. Danila will talk about that in a few minutes. But we're going to start fundraising for the administration costs, and we're working on a budget report for that soon. Any questions on any of that? Great. All right. Thank you.
Excuse me. Ken, I have one question.
Go ahead, Jen.
My question is, I was typing some translation into the box, and I missed the first step. If a person is interested in joining, what's the very first thing to do?
The step is to get in touch with one of the 20 our active members of the group.
Okay.
And express that you have an interest, or you have somebody who's interested. Okay. That person will put an application in for the individual.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. All right, so we've been having discussions on the proper procedures to do for projects. I know we have opportunities to do projects all around the world. There are plenty of needs for people with human rights needs for people with disabilities. Obviously, there are plenty. And we don't want to become overwhelmed with all of them, but we will be willing to consider some of them. But we need to get the proper process put into place, including the criteria of what would constitute a project. It's important to keep in mind that projects for this club won't necessarily mean funding. It would mean coordination. We're going to work on a project and help coordinate whatever the resources that are needed for that project to try to find them with our connections with different organizations around the world. So that's what our goal will be. I'm going to turn this over to Danilo, who's going to give a little bit of an update on what's going on with the project process. Danilo?
Hello. I will send you a link. If I stop to talk, it's because I am using a translator, okay? My English is not very well, sorry, but I will find ways to talk with you. Just a moment, please.
Sure. And I probably was talking too fast for Danilo anyway, so my bad American accent.
A little bit.
Yeah, I know.
That's not a problem.
I should know being here in Colombia and not understanding Spanish because people talk too fast.
I'm here. If you need any help, let me know, okay?
Okay, thank you, Maria. Here I have a link with the commenter. I don't know the name, but you can comment in the document. And it's the basic structure for the project. Here we have a description with how we think the projects need to work with three members of the club to help with different kinds of projects and to help with metrics and reports for the projects. These three people will work together, the board and with me, because we have a lot of ways to take this kind of projects, as Ken mentioned. A project's not about money, it's about connections. It's about help with our network or with the network of Rotary. So we have three people to analyze and to help if we need. here we have a description of enough position and some attributions, but we haven't the job description. This structure, it's analyzed by the board, and you have an okay of the directors. And now I need the comments of you to take the final version and to start the job description and to find these people who will help me with the projects. We have some questions in this document, main about the goals. That's another discussion we need to take to know exactly what our club want to do. This is the main question, because we have a lot of views, or I don't know the name, just a moment. Understanding of human rights, and we need to construct the understanding of human rights for our club, because everyone have one understanding, and we need understanding of the club, and this understanding will give us some goals. And for the projects, it's a lot of importance, because I need to know the targets, what we really need to do to find the ways to achieve this target. So I have some discussions about this point. And in the final, we have some criteria for projects proposed by members, because if you read, you will see I have two kinds of projects. A project that members will submit, and a project that the board will submit. Because if we don't have a project who helps to achieve one target, we need to create a project to achieve this target, to reach this goal. So these criteria is about the criteria for the projects people submitting. And we have a lot of questions. That questions is not final, it's initial questions. And may we have other ones that I don't think can add to this. So that's the point we are. I have an extra tour, and this is approved by board. And now I need the comments of you for know everyone it's okay with this kind or this way to do the projects. Is that you have questions?
Danilo, one of the things we found interesting in our discussions is we have always said that our goal is to work on human rights needs around the world for people with disabilities. But we are working on, actually, one of the things we're working on is what is human rights? And as we were talking, the group that was discussing it, we all had a kind of a different definition of what human rights is. So it's something that we need to continue to focus on, and as a club, trying to work on defining what is human rights for people. It's many things. It's many things. So because as we start to work on the criteria for a project, one of the things will be it the mission, the human rights mission of the club. So we need to better identify what we mean by human rights for the club. And one other thing that Danilo is working on is that we need to find certain areas of human rights or projects that we're going to be working on. Just like those that are familiar with Rotary know that Rotary has 7 areas of focus that they work on. And we need to come up with our areas of focus that we will work on to help people with disabilities and their human rights needs. So we will be defining that also in our project when we come up with the procedures that are finalized. Danilo has been working on it for a while with a few of us, and he's going to actually bring it to the board of directors, a more detailed report in January, and then we'll see what the process takes us from there. But when we're finalized the whole thing, we will let the world know about it so that we welcome people at that point to start submitting project ideas to us. And once again, the project ideas are going to have to come through active members of the club. So if somebody had a project idea, they would need to get in touch with one of the active members of the club and in order to submit a project. And we'll have a form to be filled out and all that kind of stuff. Dr. Maria, do you have a question or a point?
Yes, I just would like to suggest us to focus on the human rights pointed out by the International Convention of People with Disabilities. It's a kind of a synthesis of all human rights applied in this field. Daniel, did you understand me?
Yes.
Mm-hmm. And I'm sure Danilo is very familiar with this international convention, and I believe if we read it and we follow the guidelines, our projects would have a very nice framework to be on.
Okay, it's a good suggestion.
And Danilo has talked about setting up a committee. And certainly the committee will be made up of 2 different kinds of people. One would be active members of the club. And they can be also inactive members or people that are not members of the club or honorary members could be on that committee also. They don't necessarily have a final vote on that because they're not active members of the club, but they will certainly have a lot of opportunity to give input as to all the things that we need to consider when we're going to start accepting applications for projects. So I'm hoping that, I don't know, I can't give you an actual date that we're going to be ready for that, and I don't want to because I don't want to commit to a date because we're not ready for that yet, but it will be a process that we'll keep you in touch with on where it's going at this point. Because I know a lot of people are anxious for that to start happening, and hopefully soon. Are there any other questions for Danilo? Okay, great. Thanks, Danilo. We look forward to hearing more from you. Is there any other, before I close the annual meeting and open up the regular meeting, that anybody wants to make a comment about? All right.
Ken, when do you think that we'll be able to take on new members?
As soon as that bank account is opened up, I don't think yet he's opened it up because he's just kind of struggling now with trying to find the right bank for us. One of the banks that he was looking at, as far as transfer fees, they were too high, so he wasn't happy with that. So I'm hoping this week he's going to open up a bank account. I'm hoping, okay, I'll give you an answer. I'm hoping by January 1 we'll be able to start taking on new members. All right, so I need a mallet or something so I can officially close the annual meeting of this group. Bang. Okay, there we go. Or a bell. I need a bell to be officially a Rotary thing. Go ahead, Diana.
Thank you all for your hard work and dedication to the club. don't forget that you are only 6 months old and you've done so much. You had your structure, you had your plans, you had your structure for the service projects, for the foundation. And thank you all for coming to the meetings. I know that for some of you, it's not easy because of the, different time zones. I really want to commend the leaders of the club for this past year, and I wish them well, and all of you the next year. And I am ever so proud of you, and those of you who were there at the beginning, you know that we actually started the club in the last 2 weeks of the last Rotary year, and it's been on up and up ever since. Thank you all. Welcome to Rotary, and do good in the world, in the Rotary world, and in the world. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Diana. I was just looking at the calendar today, and it's literally almost to the day 6 months old at this point. So we're also going to be setting up some committees soon. We'll get word on that very soon, and I encourage people to be part of those committees. I'll let you know how that's going to be structured. So now I close the annual meeting, and I'm going to open up the regular meeting, and we have a presentation at our regular meeting today. And that's our own Allison, Rotarian Allison, who's a member of the group. And she's going to talk about how inclusive development aligns with the work of Rotary. So Allison, I'm going to turn this over to you.
Thanks, Ken. And I'm just going to talk for a couple minutes to introduce some concepts, and then I'll send out a document so people can easily translate it. And Dr. DeMello nicely segued from Danilo's presentation to what I was going to chat about in relation to inclusive development. So I did my doctorate work in around strength-based approaches in the United States, around community development and people with disabilities. But many of my colleagues around the world are more focused on inclusive development, kind of based on the structures of the United Nations and the World Health Organization. And so when I first learned of this Rotary initiative, I saw that as a natural fit. So I'm just going to talk a little bit about what inclusive development is in terms of, and I think there's 3 kind of key concepts that I'll put in the chat or definitions that kind of, I think, align this work with what we're doing in Rotary. And also I want to talk a little bit about something called asset-based community development, or in other countries it's called citizen-led or community-centered development. So that looks at kind of 3 central questions around when you're working with a community around a project or an initiative or a goal, kind of rather than a group of individuals coming in to help a community, looking at what can a community do for itself? What could a community do with a little help? And what does a community need significant help with in terms of reaching a goal? And I think that asset-based community development actually aligns really well with Rotary, because if you look in the community assessment tools guide, that's a resource for Rotary projects, they actually take 2 things from asset-based community development and use them. So it's the asset inventory as well as the community mapping that's discussed in that guide. Both come from asset-based community development. So, taking that idea of community-led projects further, we have inclusive development, which really looks at, when we think about people with disabilities being a larger percentage of people with disabilities live in poverty, and a large percentage of people with disabilities in the world live in developing countries. So when you think about inclusive development, the idea that people with disabilities are an active part of community development projects in their communities, and they're leading those or having a role in shaping those, can have a significant shift in how community development projects come about, what their focus is, and things like that. So I'm gonna pop in the chat kind of 3 definitions of concepts that we talk about a lot that really come from this inclusive development model. You know, we talk a lot about inclusion, and I think within development, within working on projects, that Rotary is typically focusing on looking at for people with disabilities to be equal partners and included in those processes. So not just the recipients of services, but the active partners. You know, making sure that people with disabilities have access to things in their community and how that aligns with a full range of human rights. So I think the other, I think these concepts really align well with what we're trying to do with this Rotary Club in terms of looking at projects that are, you know, involve people with disabilities, put them at the center, put us at the center of projects, as well as, you know, gives us a common language to talk about, especially in developing countries when, you know, when we're talking about things, the concept of inclusive development or community-led development can provide a framework for what we're talking about. You know, and that, you know, kind of asset-based community development can definitely provide a framework or a format for how we do those things as a club. So I just wanted to provide that really quick overview to kind of introduce that concept, because as Ken talked about, Danielle and our board are going to be kind of working through some processes to look how are we defining human rights and what does that look like for our club. Any questions?
So, Allison, how do you think that fits into Rotary in general beyond this club? Do you think there's a
when
connection?
When I read Rotary materials, I think the frameworks of you know, I see a lot of alignment with things. I think where it maybe where we have, you know, a unique influence with the concept of inclusive development is really to have people with disabilities at the center of not just being the recipient of projects or programs or funding, but having a say in what those projects look like. And I think that's, I mean, for me as a person with a disability who works, you know, kind of in that space, I think that looks very different. I think it looks different when people come into a community and say, we want to help you do this because we see a problem, as opposed to people in the community wanting to organize around something. So it's a shift from, you know, maybe what might be called a charity model to an empowerment model. So the idea that people with disabilities are deciding what's important to them.
Okay, great. And I know, as being an international group, what you're saying is different in different countries.
Well, and I think that this is actually, so this is not a US thing. That's the other thing. I think it's very much based in the UN frameworks around the development goals. And that's why I think it's relevant to this group. So this actually, other countries have influenced this concept more, have influenced the US around this concept.
Yeah, for sure. And when we had International Disability Day on December 3rd, it was heartwarming to see where all the different Rotaries were doing some events for that particular day. But it seemed to be focused on certain areas, and I applaud certainly in India and Nepal and Bangladesh and some of the African countries. They were certainly far advanced than even the United States, which really I didn't see anything coming out of the United States on that particular day. So, I mean, particular in India, where they seem to be a leader on focusing on disability issues. And Alish will probably talk a little bit about that at some point, but India still has some work as far as human rights needs are concerned, but I think the whole world does. So it's not just one particular country. So we remain at this point the only club like this in Rotary. So the direction continues to be an opportunity for us to continue to advocate and continue to bring awareness to the needs of people with disabilities around the world, but also to bring needs to people in Rotary. I had the opportunity with a number of other people, a couple other people, to talk to a subcommittee of the DEI committee in Rotary, and talk a little bit about, once again, trying to get Rotary more active on these issues. So does anybody else have any questions for Allison? Steve.
Allison, in the United States, are there any communities that are using this approach that have typically used the typical community development approach, that are starting to embrace this as a part of their program?
Yes, that concept I mentioned, asset-based community development, is very much a US thing. It started in Chicago around community organizing, and there's many disability-related organizations who use that as a model to shift from a service-based programming to more of a community-centered programming and including people with disabilities. I think more so in the United States, we see community organizing, which is more of a structure based on power components. So who has the power? What changes do you want to see? Kind of things like that. And then I think in the US, we have such a strong independent living movement. And that's kind of our structure. That's kind of how I would frame our disability advocacy movement, because there's funding attached to that as well. So that looks a little bit different.
Are there any particular communities that we can look at for best practices?
So for this, I would say to look within the inclusive development model, not necessarily the US. So in the US, we're very service and program oriented for things. We're not, and we also have, to get in the weeds, we also have we fund projects at an individual level, not at a community level, like within government programs and things. So I think in terms of like Rotary projects or things, I know of like communities coming together, and I think of when you think of projects like this, I think of a win-win-win, a win for the entire community, a win for the group that is putting something together, and kind of this inherent community benefit. So I know that, for example, I think, and this is, I know just this anecdotally, not related to, you know, this work with Rotary, but for example, a local community group asked Rotary to help remodel a park in an area that was seeing, you know, decline, hadn't been used in a while, and a group that was focused on people with disabilities came in and said, well, if you remodel it, could you also include some accessibility features? And so the Rotary, the community group that originally wanted the park improvements, and the disability related group really networked within themselves and came up with a what I would call co-design, or a project that they all added to and added value to really make it community centered, but also have the voice of people with disabilities in it.
Any other questions for Allison?
But I do have one other just to follow up on that conversation.
Go ahead, Steve.
When typically when you or somebody approaches a community with this approach, do they seem open to the idea, reluctant to embrace it, or completely confused or unaware of what it's all about?
There are folks that are skilled in using this approach where it doesn't look like any of those, because you're not approaching a community saying, let me help you. You're creating an environment, if you're the funder, if you will, or to say, tell us what's going on in this community. What do you want to focus on? How can we help you? Which is a different, tell us when you need us, not let us help you. Tell us when you need help from us. And what would that look like? And so, you know, so I think I'm using big picture, we as white Americans, you know, want to, and good do-gooders want to come into a community and help somebody. And what we might want to focus on based on data or statistics is not what a community thinks they need. You know, out of this is a story kind of, you know, of you can going into a community and asking what's going on, and also recognizing who are the key community connectors who know what's going on, who can tell you what they want to work on, looks very different, and you get very different viewpoints than what you perceive as what needs to be fixed, as I use air quotes.
In a community, is it the government, some government agency that comes to you, or is it some private nonprofit or NGO that comes to you?
I think outside of the US, so in a lot of developing countries, there are Canadian or US based non-governmental organizations who are doing this work, who are trying to identify those key community connectors that want to work on this, and our community development folks in their own communities. I think about you know, some of the WASH projects that Rotary has that I know. I have a friend in Kenya who is involved in this practice, who's also a Rotarian and who's also involved in WASH type projects, who, you know, works on the ground talking to communities about what they want to work on, what's important to them.
when one takes this approach, does it make it relatively easier to get, for instance, a global grant funding?
I don't know about that. I think I think when you look at the community assessment resource, it aligns with this. So when it talks about who are you going to engage in a community? Are you going to have a local committee involved? I think it really aligns well with that. I think, the other thing is that you get more buy-in. If I lived in a neighborhood or a town and you came in with a Rotary project because one person said, oh, we need this, and you built it and nobody used it, because nobody felt that there was a need for that. But they could, if you would have asked them, they would have said, we actually need this. Then, you get more buy-in at the local level in terms of usage, longevity, things like that. I think Janet has a question.
Janet?
Yes. I'm passing on a question from Samuel. He's listening and he's wants to know, among the rights, the human rights that you have targeted or that you're hoping to target, is the right to lodging, to a place to live. Is that one of them?
It's a tough question because certainly that impacts human rights. And we're not quite there yet to answer that question.
Okay.
Because we're still trying to define what human rights, but it certainly, a lot of things, once again, takes in human rights.
Okay.
Even the right, the opportunity to have food on your table once a day, even. To improve your water conditions. Those are all Rotary projects, and they could, for people with disabilities, improve their human rights. But we are, and Rotary does a lot of those good things. One of the things we're trying to do, and Allison, I don't know how this fits into your presentation, is make a little bit of a change in Rotary thinking. And not change, because Rotary should continue to do the good things they're doing for people with disabilities, getting wheelchairs, things like that, but focusing on other things that may be things that will teach people with disability how to empower themselves. And Allison, I don't know how that fits into your presentation, but we need kind of a change of thinking a little bit, or an additional thinking for Rotary to think about what can we do to empower people? And empower people may be to educate them, to train them, to give them vocational training, to even self-confidence. In some countries, we need to work on self-confidence because society has not been very good to people with disabilities, and so their confidence level is low, and oftentimes leads into other things like suicide. So it's that kind of a level that we're kind of focusing on at this point, and we welcome Rotary to continue to do the other good things that they're doing too, but we want to add to their activities that they're doing. So that's kind of the focus we're doing right now.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Any other comments or questions? Steve?
Question, Allison. Awareness building, is that probably the primary key place to start?
What do you mean by awareness building?
Well, in a community, building awareness about the need to do this, to reach out to groups that are willing and able to help. To realize, to understand that the problem even exists. There's the old saying, I know what I don't know, and I don't know what I don't know.
So I think this is a model. of how to utilize kind of disability-led development for these Rotary projects. So I think I don't know if I don't think it's awareness building at a community level, because the communities know what they need. So, and I think the key of that is also there are enough people with disabilities who, know what their disability community needs. And I think that's the shift of assuming that we need to be doing something for people with disabilities. And I think, so I don't know if it's awareness model or awareness building as much as shifting concepts and things. So like I think we're over, well, I mean, this goes into a, I think that goes into a different thing of, of what is the leadership of this club and this activity about, and is it the role of us to assume that we need to go provide awareness when people with disabilities in their own communities just working alongside each other people and perceiving people with disabilities as leaders reframes that question, I guess.
And I apologize, I should have been more specific. I was referring more to the broader general community of which people with disabilities are part.
And I think from a DEI perspective, people need to do their own work. So there's enough information out there that I don't think it's the role of individual people with disabilities to provide awareness to folks. I mean, there's tons, especially in the last 2 years, there's tons of ways, just as there's tons of information on anti-racism work and other things for people to be doing their own work, especially in the US. I should qualify that.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Allison. We're coming to the end of our hour, and I want to respect that. Just a couple of things before we conclude today. We're the Rotary Club, and our focus is on international human rights, but we also team up with a committee that works on Rotary and trying to help Rotary become more disability friendly, so to speak, welcoming, and then that's that committee meets once a month also. I welcome you all to attend that. That committee, a couple of things I just want to mention they're working on, and Jeremy Warner is here. He's one of them working on it. Is a podcast that the two Jeremy Opperman and Jeremy Warner are both working on. And I'm sure they'll be reaching out to some of you to be involved in that podcast in the sense of maybe being on that podcast and talking about different things about disability. And that will help with awareness. We're not only focusing on community, but we want to reach out to Rotary too in that group. The other thing that's being worked on, and there's a couple of people here, Nalish and Jeremy also, and we welcome you to be involved in that, is that we're going to be, they're going to be putting together the committee, an awareness advocacy campaign to encourage people both in the community and Rotary to advocate for people with disabilities and to do different things in different areas. And one of them certainly is to stand up for people with disabilities and their rights on different levels. It may be as government levels, it may be on club levels, it may be on Rotary International levels, it may be on individual rights levels. Somebody's rights are being abused. And they're going to have a general webinar on that. And then they're going to have workshops afterwards. But maybe the people here maybe want to get involved in some of those workshops to cover different subjects in advocacy, because it's a huge subject. And a couple other things. So that committee, its next meeting is January 3rd.
Hey,
Once
Ken,
again,
can
they're
I,
go
can I
ahead.
chime in for just a
Go ahead,
second?
Jeremy.
on,
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Just on the podcasts, on the concept that we're working on of doing the workshops and webinars. To Allison's point of people need, there are enough people out there that people need to be able to do their own work. I think part of our goal with those is opening eyes to that fact, because it really is, it's consistently going to be about people with disabilities being active within their communities, not saying, hey, look at me, but being a voice at the table. And there are a lot of communities out there, a lot of people with disabilities out there who don't know that they have the right to do that. And so that's kind of part of what we're wanting to do, is to create those opportunities for people to learn about the importance of disability and leadership and equity, true equity, striving to true equity, where we're not just a voice that's finally gotten into the room or even a voice at the table, but to where we are leaders at the table. So that's kind of what our overall vision has been in these conversations. So.
Great. Thank you, Jeremy. So as time goes on, you'll hear more about that and more about how you can get involved, Diana.
Yeah, I just want to thank you, Allison, and thank you, Jeremy, and thank you all for your input. I just want to continue what Jeremy just was saying, that you are the leaders. The fact that you are part of this club or part of the committee, or that you have this mission, you are the leaders already. And be fearless, be bold. Don't forget that Rotary is changing by the minute. In Rotary, for the past couple of years, there are so many changes daily that haven't been in years before that. And you have the great and the unique opportunity to do it, because you are a unique group, you're a unique club. You're the first club in the world that addressed those issues and that has this mission at heart. So be fearless, be bold, and the success will come by itself.
Great. Thank you, Diana. Andrew just posted, he would like to see translators here, and we will continue to work on that. I think that's an important thing that we should have, if we can do it, Steve.
There was a graphic item posted on the WhatsApp page for the club back at the end of November, and it says accessibility is being able to get in the building, diversity is getting invited to the table, inclusion is having a voice at the table, and belonging is having your voice heard at the table. Allison, does that pretty much apply to what you're talking about?
I think I put in some definitions in the chat, Steve. I'd also say that you didn't include an image description in that graphic that you sent, so not everybody was able to participate in that. So I think I think for this club being an international club, we need to look at what those international, like the UN, the World Health Organization, the UN Convention on Rights for People with Disabilities, and looking at those frameworks to talk about this work. And so that was kind of the point of bringing up the concept of inclusive development.
And Allison's correct. One of our work is some things that somewhat basic, and that is to get people to put more descriptions in. Even as I see the groups that we're involved in around the world, There's a lot of images being put on there without descriptions. So there's a lot of work to be done in that area. And to turn on closed caption meetings, we still need a lot of work on those areas. So there's things like that we continue to focus on. They're basic, but they're important. And Andrew talking about having sign language interpreters. That's maybe and part of our fundraising is to get an important part of our fundraising should be get sign language interpreters. So
I think it's really important that everybody recognize that part of what's so special about what we have created in this club is the fact that none of us are perfect at this. So we're all learning, and we're all learning from each other. And as we have this international conversation, we're learning even more about what we need to do to think outside of ourselves and outside of our own cultures to truly understand what human rights and disability, equity and all of that truly looks like at an international level, at a globe that doesn't have borders. So, sorry, Ken, go ahead.
Yeah, okay, great. I'm not sure who's sharing the screen here, but so the next meeting of this group is on January 17th, 9 a.m. Again, Eastern time. We'll continue to try to work on that time. It seems to be a good one for a lot of people. And also we, at that meeting, our district governor from District 7910 will attend that meeting and present to us. So we're looking forward to that. And once again, the next meeting of the committee is on January 3rd, 9 a.m. We'll learn more about what the direction that's taken with Rotary. So if there are no other questions from anybody or any points, I'll close this meeting out for this year. And thank you all for being a part of this worldwide activity that we're doing here. It's been really motivating for me, all the people that have taken an interest in human rights for people with disabilities. And we look to do even more in the following year. So I wish you all a happy new year.